Jacksonville, the child was born who couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. Poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history, this land of flowers.
On the 26th of October 2019, the week that was, from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. You can also pick us up on the iHeart Radio app, on the Stitcher app, on YouTube, on Twitter, flying across Facebook, Spreaker, their app or their website. You can go there also, and you can find us many places. Our web address is bostonred.org, and we're in the process of updating that. We've been neglecting it a bit, but we'll get it updated shortly here, as we're updating many things as we go along. Next year, 2020 being an election year, we'll be looking to update many things, do what we call in development some shortcuts, and as usual, we're using open source software, Audacity. We do this live, most of our broadcasts live, and they are then sent off to various outlets, is the way we do it. Nonetheless, over the weekend we have some special programming. The funeral of the Representative Elijah Cummings. President Obama was there, and he provided an address, and also the former President Bill Clinton was there also, and many others. It's about a 3.5 hour event, and what we'll do is provide an edited version of it and some general commentary, not very much, on the life of Elijah Cummings and the part that he played in the city of Baltimore. That was his district in Maryland, and his historic position there, rising from the from a neighborhood in Baltimore, and becoming a lawyer against all odds. And in the last several years, he had various illnesses that he had to deal with. He had severe pain, and he'd had surgery on a heart valve, a knee, I assume, replacement operation that it was also infected, and evidently something else that he had for the last 20 years. So in other words, there was a long list of medical problems. So he spent his last couple of years riding around in a mobilized cot, and at times to speak he would use a walker. So we'll have that particular one. And we also have Bernie Sanders. We've just about finished. This is Bernie's address in Queens, New York, with the endorsement of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And that address, we'll have it also on the bostonred.org website. Some of the things we'll have. Our next broadcast on this channel will be the Monday Morning Quarterback. And we are working on a Numbers Man presentation. That's our macroeconomics program. We normally have it over the weekend arrange, and we'll be looking there and look at some of the latest numbers and the effects of the GM strike, which has been settled. Almost 50,000 workers were out there, and we'll get some more details on that strike. What actually the workers voted for, roughly around 57%, I believe. We'll go to that in a minute here. And we'll start off with the Battle of Texas, and we've been talking about that, at least we at the Ouija board. That is our model, the counterpart to many of us, including the crystal ball. The crystal ball was on Friday night, and Friday Jobber. You can go there and find out about their presentation. A fellow named Louis Jacobson. I noticed he was also at Charlie Cook's shop, and we'll hear from Ms. Walters there, Amy Walters, and Charlie Cook as we move around. And we'll also look at a survey out of, I believe it's the University of Iowa. A little different type of survey there, but we'll look at it. Uncle Carl is talking about Texas as the Holy Grail. We've long advocated or theorized that Texas does hold some of the key, and the reason for that is a little different. The numbers of people in Texas, somewhere between 15 plus percent of the population of Texas are the followers of O.J. Simpson, African Americans. That's probably more like 16 to 17%. And then we have a very, very large Latino population in Texas, 30 plus percent. And so in other words, if we add those two groups together, they are roughly 50% or almost 50% of the people of Texas. And then we look at the urban centers, the people that live, say, in Dallas, in Houston, in San Antonio, a Latino city, El Paso, where Beto O'Rourke comes out of. Those places have been trending much more progressive as we move along. Beto ran a very good race there for Senate in red Texas. Hillary Clinton ran a pretty good race there and closed up some of the gaps in Texas. So it's only a matter of time before the Democratic Party, under a big umbrella, depending obviously on the candidate, will be able to win in Texas. And progressive candidates, more and more, are winning in Texas. More and more Republicans are retiring. So Uncle Carl knows this, and he's frightened. I don't know if he's hiding on his bed yet or not, but the situation is that, yes, it is coming. And as Bernie laid out the other day in Queens, this is a movement. It's not just about the 2020 election and the defeat of D.J. Trump. It's much more bigger than D.J. Trump. It is the whole system of American present-day capitalism is what the target is. It's not providing for the needs of the people within the 50 continuous U.S. states. That is the problem there. And in Texas, under these various Republican regimes, the governor there, Wheelchair Abbott, it's a weak governorship there, incidentally, in Texas. But the domination there by right-wing legislatures has not served the people of Texas well. In fact, in Texas is one of these areas where they should have expanded Medicaid. They do not. And various other situations there, the boom and the bust, and that's what Texas Perry, who is resigning at the end of the year from the Trump administration, he's moving out. He had a booming economy when he was running for president, and then it became a bust economy. And based upon natural resources, an example would be if you go, say, to Canada, to Calgary, a fossil fuel producer, but The nature of fossil fuels itself has changed in terms of pricing. There are less rigs out in many of these areas across North America now than before, and there's an employment problem in Calgary in Western Canada, where there was a boom there. So it's a boom and bust, that part of the economy. But in Texas, the economy is diversified, no doubt about that. There's a lot of so-called high-tech operations there. Dell, etc., are not in the energy-related situation that is more in Houston and in places like Midland, Texas, where G.W. Bush came out of, and those areas where you actually have the fracking. And this is one of the things that Uncle Carl talks about. Candidates such as Liz Warren or Bernie Sanders talking about fracking and the elimination of fracking. The problem with fracking is basically what you're doing. You're pressurizing rocks. You're using a lot of water resources that are irreplaceable, and you're destroying the environment at the same time for temporary gain. You're going into wells that one time had been abandoned, and you're squeezing out fossil fuels that should not be squeezed out. We have seen these earthquakes, and heard about them lately, in neighboring Oklahoma, where they were having more and more. They were doing a lot of fracking there. At one time were the oil wells. But the fracking show is basically in the Dakotas. North Dakota is where a lot of the fracking is being done. Fracking also in Pennsylvania. It's not just a Texas problem. So when we talk about the nationalization of campaigns, which DJ Trump has done, the campaigns, since they are nationalized, it's not just quote-unquote Texas issues alone. People in Texas, as they see more progressive-type candidates, at one time they did have progressives running in Texas and have liberals running in Texas, not as liberal as others in the form of LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, but you had Ralph Yarborough, and that was a split between the Democratic Party that John F. Kennedy went there to try to sow off. The more progressive wing of the party was Ralph Yarborough, as opposed to Lyndon Johnson, but they did have the party, and at that time, the Democratic Party in Texas had most of the seats in the state of Texas. But the problem was they did not push in Texas, and they were moving in that direction to a more progressive Democratic Party in Texas. Now, we didn't have the alternative in Texas of running an independent Labor Party. However, even the trade union organizations in Texas, through such things as the Fight for 15, have brought about more unionization than ever before. We'll talk a little about unionization when we go to the GM strike and what it affected there. So we'll leave Uncle Carl at that, and we'll do Charlie Cook later in the broadcast here. And we'll go now to Chile, which some of the right-wingers spotlight. They took a Milton Friedman type approach at one time under the dictator Pinochet. Pinochet is now dead and disgraced, but Chile now has a right-wing government. For many years there, they had a socialist government, and the president was Michelle Bachelet, and she is now head of the UN's Human Rights Division, and they're investigating violations of human rights in Chile by the constabulary police officers, etc. And on Friday we had the largest demonstration ever, one of the largest ever in Chile. Over 1 million people took to the street to oppose the right-wing government now there in Chile. Now this government has offered some half-hearted concessions, but they're going to have to go beyond that. And you're having this type of unrest. We had it in Lebanon, due to austerity, usually the IMF and other agencies put upon them. In Lebanon, they also had to make concessions. In Ecuador, the government there literally had to move from the capital of Quito out to a different capital and come back again. That is people in the streets. The old rallying cry out of the so-called suites. That's more of a corporate form of capitalism in the more developed economies, but from within the local capitalist reigns into the streets, their parliamentary politics or electoral politics. We're seeing more of that happen around the world in terms of people out demonstrating. Large demonstrations are taking place in Zimbabwe. A little different there. That's against sanctions. There's a good article. Hopefully we'll get that up here by no other than Ihan Omar, the representative from Minnesota, talking about sanctions. She wrote it in the Washington Post. We'll have to get that one up, and so we can expound upon it and move forward on that particular routine. Let's go now to, where are we going to here? We'll go, I believe, to, well, we'll see what pops up first. It's kind of who's on first. Incidentally, the World Series Game 4 will be played tonight in Washington, D.C. The games are 2-1 in favor of the Washington Nationals. They won both games in Houston, Texas. The Astros won the game last night 4-1. So we'll be playing this weekend, and there will be a Game 5. Even DJ Trump claims he'll show up for Game 5 tonight in Washington. And we don't have the pitches here. Evidently, the Nationals announced their pitcher. The Astros are doing it literally by committee, and that just kind of shows you what has happened there. And Game 5, they will, let's see, we'll have Mr. Cole back once again. That'll be in Game 5 on Sunday night, period. And this was on the 23rd. I'm just looking at the Vegas Insider. The route there, Strasburg, he'll be pitching there again. This was Justin Van Lader that was routed by Steven Strasburg on that particular night. It wasn't Garrett Cole, but anyway, the commanding 2-1 lead there. And Kurt Kazuki was kind of interesting. He evidently has an injury now and didn't play last night. He is the catcher for the Nationals. We'll see if he comes out there and what will happen there. Yeah, Garrett Cole, he started the first game, and last night it was Anibal Sanchez, and that was Zach Greinke. We remember Zach Greinke. He was with the Cubs, I believe, one time. He was with the L.A. Dodgers, and this was the first game. We'll have a special, incidentally, on the World Series. This was the first World Series game in the Capitol since 1933. So kind of a roundup of where these people were. This is coming from the Vegas. The odds makers favored, no doubt, the Houston Astros. Van der Ladder is now 0-5 in 6 World Series starts. He gave up 7 hits and 4 runs. Of course, he was lifted there after Kazuki's home run there. Van Lander leads the majors with 21 wins this series and struck out a career 300 to reach 3,000 in his career. And he has a World Series ring, an MVP ring, and a Cy Young trophy, and 3 no-hitters in his name. So this man was an excellent pitcher. You knew he'd done that. He's up there very close to Nolan Ryan. But he did not fare so good there in the game in Houston, period. From A.J. Hinch, this was the last game in Houston, Game 2. The Nationals have outplayed us at the bottom line. He is there. But last night, Trey Turner and the Nationals, the upsets of the Nationals just did not come up to it, period. So that tends to be, even Juan Soto did not have an outing. And Greinke, of course, he was acquired from Arizona on June the 31 deadline. He moved from the Dodgers to Arizona. Didn't do a lot, so there. He was 0-2 with a 6.43 ERA, but he did very, very well last night. There was no doubt about that, his ability to rise to the quote-unquote occasion, and in fact, he did rise to the occasion. So we'll look to that particular outing and see where we are. Let me just move along here. The body, incidentally, of the Spanish dictator has been removed from a mausoleum. They had it into a family burial plot. That is a good outcome there, no doubt about it, and we look forward to seeing more good outcomes of that nature as we move along here. Incidentally, elections on Sunday in Argentina. There we have Christine Fernandez de Kirchner running. Again, she was president there when her husband Nestor passed. But she is back running once again there. And she's running this time for vice president, a larger-than-life Peronist. I think we may have went over this 2007 to 2015. That's Argentina. The economy there is in tatters also, and there's a big problem. So we're looking at, I think we highlighted Chile. That's President Lenin Moreno. The same situation you have in Peru, in Ecuador. We talked about that. And Lenin Moreno there. In Chile, cost of living, pressures there. The pressures are basically about the same period that we have, and we've continued to have them in various countries. Living standards, cost of living, jobs, not having jobs for the young people in the country, period. In its 20th century heyday, Argentina had fertile plains that made it a global breadbasket, was richer than Japan, had more cars than France, but from the ashes of the Great Depression came not a rebirth, but a long and slow decline marked by destructive military governments and there. So you had the Peronists there, and they were populists under Juan Perot. So once again, you have this situation there with flirting with so-called modern-day capitalism that is not working. Modern day, I should say, industrial capitalism. We see that over and over in the IMF playing in there, and the development of austerity. Now, in the American politics, we heard the word austerity for the first time. It was amplified under the administration of Jimmy Carter. So austerity has been out there. Reagan had austerity in his administration after President Carter's defeat. Incidentally, President Carter fell. This time he kind of fractured his pelvis. It's an unfortunate situation. They're going to have to do some things with President Carter. No doubt about that. So one of the many things that we have out here. Let's move on here. We moved around there to Argentina. That election, of course, coming up. And in the week we had the Republican lawmakers. They disrupted the impeachment inquiry. And later today, on Saturday, we'll have a hearing, unusual hearing. The person that was disrupted there and had to be canceled will appear today. Now the Republicans are claiming, and they are Republicans, incidentally, sitting on this committee. Yeah, this is not Laura Cooper, but anyway, this is one of the people from the Defense Department that was scheduled to testify there. But today they're claiming, the Republicans that is, that because of the weekend some of them would not be able to be there. Now, it was roughly about 20 lawmakers. The Capitol Police were called. Well, some of them were there. They pushed past them, so they're going evidently from their offices, the suites, to the streets. So this applies to the right wing here. The representative there is Matt Gartz, I think is how you pronounce it. Outspoken Trump supporter. He led the action. And on top of that, our own Stephen Lynch, who's allowed to attend the deposition as a member of the House Oversight Committee, said Cooper did not testify. That was a scheduled person to testify. Cooper, Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia and Ukraine and Eurasia. So they've had William Taylor there. He voluntarily testified, and he's the one that talked about the so-called quid pro quo that Trump thought it was a very bad idea. And who looms large in this is no than old John Bolton. He thought it was a very bad idea. That's the idea of the political standoff with political trade-off, I should say, with the Ukrainian government to investigate Joe Biden. So not only do we have that situation, federal law, this is Reuters, points out that it's prohibited from accepting foreign help there, and evidently that's what it did. As foreign help there, not acceptable. You cannot do that particular item. And in the on a different plane, back to the old Mueller investigation, there was a review of it. There's several reviews of it. The committees in the Congress are looking at it, but also the independent watchdog Inspector General's office is looking at it, and the Justice Department looking at it just at a general inquiry of what happened in 2016 with the Russian investigation, the Trump campaign, etc. And now they've upgraded that in a political stunt, no doubt about it, to the so-called criminal investigation. What you always do when you put the word into the press criminal, that has an annotation there also that something is going wrong. We saw that in the 2 Hillary Clinton investigations of her server there, and they literally, the FBI, Comey, came out and stopped the clock. The last time it stopped the clock and looked at it, and there was no wrongdoing. But that does confuse the people because they hear the word criminal, and the subliminal line there is somebody has committed a crime, period. So this is what the Trump administration counted through their Justice Department errand boy, the Attorney General Barr. And that in itself it involves more and more confusion. This is one reason from this mic we have been a little skeptical of the whole impeachment situation. Where does it go? Now the assumption here, at least what we see, is they will have an investigation. Once they finish the investigation, they will have some public hearings with the more pronounced people, in other words, the people that give the best testimony. That's the Democrats will. And at the conclusion of the public hearings and questioning before the quote-unquote, what we used to call TV cameras euphemistically, a report will be written. Now, what will happen after the report, we don't know. Will there be a formal articles of impeachment? Maybe, maybe not. It's possible, depending on how the report turns out, that they'll just leave that to the election in November of 2020. That would be one possible outcome. But we constantly warn people not to spend a lot of time on this impeachment situation. There are other things that need to be done out there. And let's just move on here, and we'll take a break. Well, we'll do this while we're doing it. Katherine Johnson, a trailblazing reporter for the Associated Press, she reported during the Civil Rights Movement, and legendary there, died as she was 93. And her niece, Rebecca Winters, said Johnson died in Atlanta, Georgia. The only journalist allowed in Dr. King's house the day he was assassinated. She also covered the event in Alabama when Wallace stood in the gate. She did an interview of William Calley Jr. He was before he was convicted of his role in the My Lai affair. Anthony Bailey, incidentally, represented him. I was never ambitious, really anxious to make money, she told an interview at Oral History Project in 2007, and she didn't want to be bored, and added, in my career, I really wasn't. Her career spanned 50 years from the era of reporting, racing, when reporters were racing each other, to payphones, to the birth of the 24-hour cable channel. She began covering Dr. King when he was a little-known Baptist preacher from Atlanta. On April the 4th, that was the day Dr. King was murdered, Johnson was on a date where, on her way to the movies, with the news of the assassination, when she arrived at King's house, two reporters were chatting with a police officer on the porch. Coretta King, in a pink house gown, stood in the hall. She spotted me and said, "Let Catherine in," she recalled. So that's that story. We're glad to get that in, and let's move on here past this one and see where we end up here. Oh, the General Motors strike, it has ended, a strike by workers, and its effect on U.S. job growth. We'll have that on Numbers Man out here. The monthly strike report, 46,000 GM workers were idle at the plants in Michigan and Kentucky during the October payroll count. That will count up there. They settled the strike. Now, drawing comparisons, now this was 1998 strike at GM. Economists estimate the current work stoppage to cut off between 75 and 80,000 jobs from the non-farm payroll in March. Actually, the strike will wipe out any job gains in September. We won't get into much of this, but the agreement that they reached, and it is now, they have now settled the agreement. Now let's move along here a little bit. The Pentagon contract, I don't know if we probably talked about it in the open source report, but nonetheless, Amazon was favored to get it because they do a lot of cloud computing, and Amazon is the one that does the CIA's cloud. But that $10 billion contract was awarded to Microsoft. They're beating out Amazon. This is again from Reuters. It was unexpected there. It's called the Joint Enterprise Defense Infrastructure Cloud, and is part of a modernization by the Pentagon. And Oracle, of course, was not very happy about this. Esper removed himself, he's the Secretary of Defense, from the deliberation, because evidently IBM his son is employed with IBM. IBM did not make the cut, the IBM cloud. So thus the shares of Microsoft went up 2.5%, and Amazon down 0.98%. They also had Amazon, not the cloud, but they had some other problems going on there also. Let me just quickly move here. This is Reuters here. Facebook ad policy challenged by false claims Republican. Graham backed the Green New Deal. I'd not heard about this one. A left-leaning political group is challenging Facebook's policy not to fact-check some ads by running a spot that falsely claimed that Graham had endorsed the Green New Deal. That's Senator Graham of South Carolina. They, of course, come under fire. They came under fire this week from Auntie Waters, chair of the Financial Committee in the Senate. So Zuckerberg was there, I believe, for 6 hours. New ad cycles through archived footage of Reagan and Tricky Dick, spliced together two real videos of Graham to make it look as he would say, "We believe in the Green New Deal." Graham's office said he was was aware of the ad and confirmed the senator opposed the Green New Deal. This is interesting here. So anyway, the Reality Online Lefty League said he came up with the idea to draw attention to that. They spent $50 to put the ad on. So it really cheap price. You can put an ad on Facebook and make, quote unquote, the big time. Let me just what we wanted here. We'll do that. We'll do the survey out there. This is actually from the CRN. This is a technical integrators situation there. We've had dealings with them for a very, very long time. Anyway, Defense Department chose Microsoft over Amazon, a $10 billion program. This is the JEDI particular situation there. This is from the integrators standpoint. Today has taken another step towards implementing our cloud strategy with the awarding of an enterprise general purpose cloud contract to Microsoft, the Pentagon said. This continues our strategy of a multi-vendor, multi-cloud enterprise as the department needs are diverse and can't be met by a single supplier. The Department of Defense said the base contract period is 2 years with $1 million guarantee. The department said projects that users adopt will drive an estimated $210 million of spending during the 2-year base period from the DOA. We incidentally at Cranston saw we bid on some of these a long time ago. Some of the greatest companies in the world are competing there. The president said during a sit-down with the president of the Netherlands, citing Microsoft, Amazon, where we hope they go beyond Amazon and Microsoft. But get a little different take here from this particular item. Anyway, let us now go, and we need to find our poll here. It is somewhere hidden in the vast stacks here, and we'll see if we can find it without taking a break. We will take a. Sometimes when we have things, actually we had it up. All right, this is this poll here, and this is the only poll we'll do, and we'll go to Charlie Cook to Wyatt. This is Iowa State University. I thought it was Iowa State University. Iowa Voters Survey, likely Democratic Caucus attendees. Civiquois, I think, is CIVIQS is the name of the poll. You probably have not heard of it. But anyway, it contains results of a civics poll. It's 598 likely Democratic Caucus attendees from Iowa. The poll was done on the 18th to the 22nd of 2019. Likely Democratic Caucus attendants are respondents who answered they would definitely or probably attend the caucuses. Here's a margin of error of 5%, and whom to contact here. Chief of the civic poll there, Drew Linzer, who Drew Linzer is. And here's the results. This is what you wanted to hear. How likely is it that you will attend the Democratic caucus scheduled for February 2020? Definitely will attend. 69%, probably will attend 31%. If the Democratic caucus were held today, this is how it found out. Elizabeth Warren, 28%. Buttigieg, 20%. 18% for Bernie Sanders. 12% for Joe Lunchbox Biden. Amy Klobuchar got 4%. Kamala Harris, 3%. Tom Steyer, I think, 3%. Tulsi, I suppose. Gabbard at 2%, and Andrew Yang at 2%, and the 1% is Senator Booker, Beto O'Rourke, and some that have dropped out. Incidentally, Julian Castro is running a short on money. He may not be able to continue. Tulsi Gabbard is not running for re-election to the House of Representatives from Hawaii. There's some news that came up here. She's pursuing her newfound fame at Democratic caucus today. Which of the following candidates would be your second choice? 24% chose Senator Warren of the Commonwealth, 14% Buttigieg, 13% Bernie Sanders, statistically pretty much tied up at 10%. Joe Lunchbox Biden. Amy Klobuchar got 7%, which is good for Amy Klobuchar, and 6% to Harris, 5% to Tulsi Gabbard. How well does the phrase "he's honest" describe Joe Biden? Very well, 26%. Quite well, 37%. How well does the phrase "he provides strong leadership"? A lot of people looked at leadership. I noticed the HO that was looking at leadership surveys. Don't amount to that much. Very 29%. Quite well, 32%. Not so well, 20% there. Compassion, 42%. Very well. We won't go through all this. Bernie Sanders, he's honest, 56%. Very well, quite well, 31%. It's an interesting questionnaire they did. Leadership, Bernie gets 45%, and very well, and 28% there. Not too well, only 17%. There is a compassion, 54%. Very well, quite well, 30%. Kamala Harris, very well, 18% and 36%. On she's honest, I think they really don't know her. Leadership, she gets 27 for very well and 36. Not shabby at all there. Buttigieg, honest, 49% and 27% there. Leadership, 39 and 31. That's quite well and very well. Compassion, 48% and 27%. They weren't too hard on him. Amy Klobuchar, she's honest, 30% and 32%. That's a little low for Amy there. Leadership, very well, 22%. Quite well, 29%. Not too well, 18%. And so forth and so on. She's compassion, very compassion, 20%. Quite well, 32%. Not too well, 16%. And 25% don't know. Look at these don't know category. Quarter of the people that didn't know about it. Elizabeth Warren, she is honest, 40%, and very well in terms of honesty, 36% there. Leadership, 50%. Those are good numbers for Elizabeth. And 33% very well there. She's compassion, 50%, and so forth. And they don't know, pretty low here, 4%. So that just means people familiar with her do a little bit of the crosstabs here. The Democrats attend the caucuses, 70%. The Independents, 67%. The male-female split up there, 71% of the females and 69% of the males, 82% of the 18 to 34 years old. Very good group there for Bernie Sanders. And 54% of the 35 to 40, 70% of the 50 to 60, 74, and 70% there. Those will definitely appear there. A total of 69% and probably will 31% there. The European and non-European sectors there, 69 and 31% there. The non-Europeans, 54%, and probably 46%. Non-college is 66% and 30%. This is Iowa, incidentally. The college grads, 70%, and these will definitely appear, and probably 29%. Post-grads, 80% and 20%. Caucus votes there, definitely will. For Warren, 75%. Buttigieg, 62%. Bernie Sanders, 73%. Biden, 70%. Others, 67%. And the probablys there for Bernie, 27%. Biden, 30%. And that is where these are some of the crosstabs. Spend a little time on this one because it is a little different one here. Well, which of the following candidates would be your first choice? We ran over that one. Elizabeth Warren at 33% for the Democrats, 18% for the Independents. Buttigieg, what was 20 for the Democrats, 18%. He has about equal support there. Bernie Sanders, 13 for the Democrats, 27 for the Independents. Joe Biden, 13 for the Independents, and 11 there. So probably with the female people, Liz Warren 30% and males 25%. Bernie Sanders 15% female and 23% male. You can see where that is going. And Amy Klobuchar, the interest in her, female 3%, she needs to get that up. And 5% of the males, 3% of the independents, 5% of the Democrats for 4% total. 18, and she's only doing 1 and 2%, 18 to 34. The 35 to 45, 3% there, and 7%. She's doing better with the 50 to 64, and only 2% of those that are older. So that is the crosstabs. Let me just look at this. Well, we'll have to wind this down. This is WBRN Radio broadcast booth. Hold on, we'll be back. Okay, this is from the Cook Report. Amy Walter here. Can Warren beat Trump? Chatting with almost any political professional in and around Washington, you'll find something of a consensus. Elizabeth Warren's going to be the nominee. She's going to have a hard time beating DJ Trump. This is Amy Walter. I spent time looking at the first point. Today I want to walk you through the second. Got a little carried away here on my pointer. Come back here. Anyway, the easy case to make against Warren is that she's too liberal, too coastal, too polarizing to win. Former Blue Wall Midwest states need to capture the Electoral College more, with Democrats' biggest political success in 2010 came in suburban America, where former GOP voters, some turned off by Trump, personality in politics, have been voting for Democrats. Warren's, and she points out here, Medicare for all, the elimination of student debt, free college, and the breakup of big banks and big tech companies. The fact that she has a plan to pay for all of her programs by simply asking super rich taxpayers to pay more in taxes, her called ultra millionaire tax. Probably calls herself a capitalist, proudly, isn't going to stop Republicans from labeling her as socialist, no doubt about that. The socialist label will stay, especially when she's advocating for complete elimination of private health care coverage. Moreover, it seems that almost everybody in town has a story about someone they know who is anti-Trump, but can you stomach the idea of voting for Liz Warren? Well, that's interesting how they are putting this out here from this conservative, middle-of-the-road project here. And I'm going to have to finish this up here. Many of those who say they hate Trump but can't vote for Warren are getting more attention than is warranted. Those voters are politically engaged at this point, such as getting into Twitter feeds, etc. Again, those are usually contrived. It's easy to see how Trump and the GOP demoralizes Warren, but it's way too easy to know how all swing voters are going to react. It's unfair to assume that she will wilt under Trump's attacks. Unlike Hillary Clinton, Warren has a clear and a consistent message and a compelling narrative, no doubt about that. In the Commonwealth, she beat pretty boy Brown like a redhead stepchild. I think that's one of LBJ's things. She is disciplined, tough to knock off Kinder, off message. She doesn't act to sound like a well-tested politician, no doubt about that. But she's very good in, this is Elizabeth Warren, in retail politics. A woman who has literally spent her entire career studying and advocating for getting the corrupt influence out of money in politics, and of course her decision to identify as Native American on the employment application form early. They have mentioned all these can be used to undercut her authenticity narrative. We don't know, however, if the Pocahontas baiting done by Trump is really baked into the cake. In other words, despite Warren's messy attempt at cleaning up the controversy, that was a DNA test there. She should have phrased that as a cultural situation and not DNA, because many of the tribes don't recognize DNA because their samples are not as well out there as they would be other places. And I'm having some problems with my pointer here. Anyway, Sanders is still running strong. This is 18 to 34, while Biden retains a solid hold on followers of O.J. Simpson, African American voters. But that's transitioning. This isn't to say that a primary goes forward. She can't pick up those votes. Well, yeah, she could. In 2018, turnout amongst all groups surged, regardless of the type of Democrat on the ballot, and that is definitely correct there. What about the Midwest? In theory, that makes a lot of Trump because of his similar promises on those issues. Many of the voters say they are drawn to Trump. He's anti-corruption, populist message, drain the swamp, when in fact he is a swamp. At least 3 political scientists. John Slides, I've read his book. Michael Tesla argued that race, not economic populism, was the main driver in the 2016 election. Their analysis, identity crisis, the 2016 presidential campaign, the battle for the meaning of America. They write attitudes concerning race, ethnicity, and religion were strongly related to how Americans voted in 2016 than in recent elections. By contrast, the apparent impact of economic anxiety was much smaller and not particularly distinctive compared to early elections. The activation of racial attitudes helped Trump more than Clinton. There's no doubt about that. Clinton was not helped by those. And finish this up. In 2020, will help Trump again. Warren will want to go tit for tat with Trump and economic inequality, corporate corruption. Trump wants the fight to be about open borders, socialism, gun grabbing. He's not going to bait Elizabeth Warren into that. Elizabeth Warren is from Oklahoma, and no doubt there were a lot of guns around there. So that's something they haven't brought up there. How well was she doing? Red Texas. We started this out with Carl Rove and his Texas gamut there. She wants to put a lot of that was Hillary Clinton, coal miners. Well, they have coal miners where Elizabeth Warren is from. Just imagine how Warren's called to ban all fracking is going to play in western Pennsylvania. Well, it won't play that well, but again, that's western Pennsylvania. They'll play well in Philadelphia and other places. The big question mark hanging over all this analysis is for where Trump sits in November 2020. The closer he is to a low end of his approval rating of 35 to 40, he has to get lower than that to get knocked off. The easiest to make the case that any Democrat can win. Well, first of all, we at the Ouija board see Trump as more 30 to 25. The closer he is to the higher level, 43 to 46, a strong case for Trump. Warren becomes a more of a risk than a less risk looking at it there. Well, no doubt if you're going to make that proposition, but you didn't make it for Bernie Sanders. Very interesting here, coming from where it came. President Trump is doing everything possible to look like the more dangerous pick. Well, again, the Syrian thing that Amy Walter points out really is not a problem. It's foreign policy. People don't look at it as much. We'll come back tomorrow, the next broadcast of Monday Morning Quarterback, and have Charlie Cook in the mix here from the Cook Report, and we'll bring some others in. We try to balance this around with various people that we use, and I think, let's see, what's Mr. Cook doing here? Little reason to think Republicans will abandon Trump. He's talking about that. He's writing on the 25th of October. This will do it for us. This is Boston Red and the Jerry Pippin broadcast booth. We'll see you on the Monday Morning Quarterback, and we have, incidentally, specials coming up on the funeral of Elijah Cummings and the World Series. We've just about got that report together. A little different. We'll be talking about the Homestead team that was in Washington. They were also in Gary, Indiana, and we'll talk about the series that they conducted that lasts for 10 days. That was during the period of apartheid desegregation. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on Monday morning. Good day.